Well, hi everyone. Welcome back to my studio. A question I'm commonly asked is, how do I go about getting started in scale modeling? And also, do you have a video on it? Well, yes, I guess. If you're watching this, yes, I now have a video on getting started in scale modeling, so welcome. Um, Over the course of this series of videos, we're going to build together, and we're going to end up building what I consider to be one of the best starter kits out there, and certainly one of the best kits for anybody out there, but a very, very accessible kit. Builds nicely, there's nothing in here that will fight you. This is Tamir's F16 CJ in 1 in 48 scale. Now, one of my favorite kits of all time is their 1 in 32nd scale F16. But the build and construction on it is pretty much exactly the same as this. There's a little bit less detail, but it's also quite a bit cheaper. So something to really start with. If you do make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. You haven't invested the family savings in it. The 1 in 16 scale one's a little bit more. So we're going to build this together. But in this first video, I'm going to go over some of the equipment that you need to be able to build scale models. So let's have a close look at the bench. Come and join me. Okay, well, here on my bench are some of the basic tools I use a lot when I'm building scale models. Now, scale modeling is like many things. There's equipment for absolutely everything. The only limit being your budget, what your significant other will tolerate, and what they can kind of foist on you. You don't need an awful lot of things to be able to build scale models. When I started out building scale models about 38 years ago, I was much more limited in what I had. I didn't have some side cutters, I just had scissors, this kind of thing. But now with all this experience, these are the things that I think that you really need to get started. And some of these you can leave out, but a lot of these are really important. Okay, so with the model kit, the parts come attached onto what's called a sprue. It keeps the parts together, keeps them organized. The sprues are lettered and numbered so that you can find the parts that you need. But what that means is it isn't like a set of Legos where you simply take the parts out and then assemble them onto each other. You actually have to remove them from the sprue. So you need some form of cutting. Now, as I said, when I started out, I was just using a pair of scissors. Now, that's not a very good way of doing it. The reason being that they actually have a width to them. So when you do this, it puts stress on the plastic. It can break the parts a little bit. I mean, when I first started out with my first kit, I think I just twisted them off the sprues. Now, that's a good way to absolutely destroy the parts. Please don't do that. But scissors also aren't a good solution. What you need is a pair of side cutters. That's what these things are called, or nippers. They go by both names. And these are very flat on the one side and very sharp. So when you cut the part against the sprue gate, you get a really, really sharp cut that doesn't stress the part at all. Now, I think these ones were about $30. They're pretty new to me. I've had God hand ones before. They're more like $60. You can get some basic Tamir ones for around $10. You don't need to spend a fortune on them, but what you get by spending a bit more money is you get the sharper blades, so you get the crisper cut. Now, that's important to get a good finish, but it needn't be the be-all and end-all. Even with a set of cheap cutters, you can get the parts off the sprue relatively effectively. So if you're first starting out, maybe not sure whether you're going to continue building in the future, perhaps invest in maybe a cheaper set of cutters, a $10 pair or something like that. You can get them everywhere. Amazon, if you don't have a hobby store near you. If you do have a hobby store near you, please support your hobby store, as they're so important to this hobby. They'll be able to pop out and get parts really soon. You know, the Amazons of this world don't need your money in the same way that the hobby store does. But if you don't have one, which many people don't now because people haven't been using them, Amazon can help you out with almost all of these things. So yeah, there's the first step, a nice pair of side cutters, or a not so nice pair of side cutters, but a pair of side cutters to cut the parts of the sprue. Absolutely essential. Now, with some of the parts, they're quite difficult to get off the sprues because of the way in which they're attached. And that's where a craft knife comes in. This is just a basic number 11 blade craft knife. Inexpensive again, hobby store if you can, otherwise online retailers have them as well. Keep the blade sharp. I change out my blade about every model. Sometimes twice a model because I drop them on the floor and break the tips of them, but that's on me. Maybe you're not as clumsy as I am. But yeah, a good craft knife or not so good craft knife as well. Um, Really, really useful, invaluable in your model making. Okay, so you've cut the parts off the sprues. There might still be a little bit of plastic that's there. Now, there's two ways in which this plastic might be there. It might be a bit of flash, or it might be some some of the gates where you haven't quite got it off properly, and that's where these sanding sticks come in. Now, I'm going to talk about these a little bit later on as well. But I go for 4 different grades essentially. I actually have a lot more. Most of them are useless though. Well, not useless, but you just don't need that many. 180 grit, this is for really grinding down parts. If you do have a big sprue gate or you have some it's an area where something hasn't joined up so well, 180 will help you grind that down. 240 is my go-to. It's a relatively gentle grit and it'll help you just clean up the parts a little bit without removing huge amounts of material. 400 I use just for that sort of final polish when I'm cleaning up parts, and then 800 if I kind of really need it. If you're going to be doing work on the canopy, then you are going to need 800 and some polishing compound. But we'll deal with that later on. But for now, this will get you started. All of this is all you need. So 180, 240, 400 and 800, and 800 being optional. You don't necessarily need that one. These things are inexpensive as well. Hobby store, of course, online retailer. If you don't want to do either of those things and you want to go steal some from somewhere, you can go and get some from your wife or your mom's makeup selection, where nail files basically do exactly the same thing. So there's a few options for you on those. Okay, some of the parts in these scale models are very small, and for those you're going to need some tweezers. Now, this is something where I would suggest investing a little bit more money on them. These are DSPI ones. I think these were about $10 if I remember correctly from the hobby store, relatively inexpensive. But the benefit that you get from these, very, very fine points, and the points absolutely join together until you drop them on the floor. Then they don't. But if you don't drop them on the floor as much as I do, then you probably don't need loads and loads of them. But yeah, that'll let you hold onto the parts really firmly. You can go cheaper. For example, I got these ones. These ones I got online. I think they were 50 cents each or something like that. The tips don't join up quite so well. As you can see, they're not quite as fine, but they'll do the job if you're on a budget. So don't feel shy about going for something like this. These ones are better. They will keep you going for a longer time. These ones will do the job perfectly well. So it's kind of up to you. Okay, so the next things that we're going to need, I really like to use clamps, and I like these Irwin quick grip clamps. Easier to use than it is to say, seemingly. You just slide them back and forth, and then you can clamp them down. Be careful not to clamp them down too tightly, but these can be really useful for holding together parts of the fuselage and that sort of thing during assembly. The bigger the scale to go, the bigger clamps you need. I have these bigger clamps as well. These you can clamp sort of across the fuselage a bit more if you're building in like 1 in 32nd scale. You need to be a bit bigger. These kind of clamps are really useful as well. Just clamp those parts in place while they're gluing, so maybe holding a wing together or something like that. Really, really useful. Again, all of these things can be obtained from your hobby store. If I were you, I'd probably go to the hardware store for these sort of things, because as soon as something gets the hobby label on it, the prices all go up. But these are all just DIY things, and DIY stores don't charge you as much for stuff. Okay, next things that we're going to need. You're going to need to be painting at some point. So a selection of paintbrushes. These are pretty good quality Kolinsky paintbrushes. You don't need to spend this much money. Instead, you can get something cheaper. You can pick up a pack of 10 from your local arts and crafts store or your hobby store, and they'll set you back about $5 or something like that. But a selection of different sizes of paintbrushes is super useful. This raggedy looking one here, this is a dry brush. This is going to come in really useful for when we're building the cockpit area. You probably want to pick one of these up. You can get by with these to start off with. But one of these I've used, as you can see, I've used this forever, and I use this for doing the instruments in the cockpit, just brushing on some aluminum coloured paint, just to pick out the details there. So a set of paintbrushes, they're going to come in useful. Okay, Everyday household things that I use a lot as well. Q-tips, use these all the time, absolutely invaluable for building scale models with. Buy big boxes of them, there's nothing special about them, certainly don't buy hobby ones, these are just from the local supermarket, but really good just for cleaning things up a little bit, you know, easing off some of the surface treatments which we're going to be applying later on. Really, really useful. Cocktail sticks or toothpicks, also really useful. These ones are multicolored ones. They're all that my local supermarket had at the time. It was during Helen, and so they hardly had anything. So I ended up with these multicolored cocktail sticks or toothpicks, but I quite like them anyway. I won't buy multicolored ones again. I'll buy normal ones, but these are really good for just cleaning up a little bit of glue here and there, or applying a daub of glue onto it where you want to get it onto a small area. Toothpicks, really useful. Who knew that they were going to be such a good hobby tool? Okay, next up, let's look. So tape, I use an inordinate amount of tape. So there's a couple of uses that tape is put to. This is masking tape, so you can use it for masking. That's as the name would imply, of course. So when you're painting, you can get really crisp straight lines on things. Now for the masking purpose, I actually use 3 different kinds of tape. So this is flexible masking tape. This is sort of made out of a plastic material. So this allows you to put curves on there, really useful. You can probably get away without this to start off with. It'll make life easier if you do have some, but you certainly don't need it. Then Tamiya tape. Tamiya tape is the go-to. This stuff is superb. Not too sticky, sticky enough that it stays attached, not too sticky that it leaves sticky residue behind. Really, really good. I use it in 3 sizes, 18mm, 10mm, and then 6mm. You can see those are different thicknesses. Really, really useful. And then for masking as well, this is just 3M delicate painter's tape. Get this from the hardware store, but obviously as you can see, it's a lot wider, so you can cover bigger areas with it. And it's much, much cheaper than this stuff as well. So I use a lot of this. I try not to stick it down too hard, because obviously it is you know, hardware store masking tape. But I've had no issues with it pulling the paint off at all. So really, really useful and a good way to save some money. The other place where I like to use this tape is to hold parts together whilst they're gluing. So for example, let's say you've got the fuselage. You join the 2 halves of the fuselage together, then you wrap some tape around it and it holds it in place while the glue cures. Really, really useful. I find the most useful one for that is this 10mm stuff. The 6mm stuff tends to snap if you put it under too much tension. The 18mm stuff can be a bit too wide for some areas. So the nice balance is the 10mm. I also use some just household rubber bands as well for that same purpose, just a rubber band. They can also hold the fuselage together. It's always useful to have a few of those laying around. Okay, so as I've said, we're going to be gluing things together. You're going to need some glue as well. Now, I'm going to deal with paints in the next video. That's a subject completely unto itself. We talked for days about different types of paint. But we will talk about glue in this one, because this is more of a basic tool. Now, I use essentially, well, 4 types of glue. 3 of them here. But I use the extra thin cement. This stuff is really, really good. Tamiya, I swear by it. I've tried other brands. In my opinion, they're not as good. I'm sure people say in the comments that they have a great brand. Please share. If you do have a brand that you really like and you're a more experienced modeler, let us know in the comments. Share with us. But yeah, I like Tamiya stuff. So this is the Tamiya extra thin cement. This is useful for joining parts. You just put a brush a little bit on when you're holding the parts together. It cures really, really quickly. And it puts parts together with very little mess. Now for some of the larger areas that you'll need to join together, maybe the seams along the fuselage, this orange Tamiya cement, the standard stuff, is really, really good. So that's the same thing I do. I use a lot of this stuff as well. And then some super glue, just normal household super glue for gluing metal parts on if you've got some metal parts, maybe gluing on the ordnance if you need it to set quickly. So super useful. And then the other kind of glue, which I didn't put out on the bench before, and I've got a particularly messy little bottle of, I swear by this MIG Ammo Ultra Glue. It's absolutely superb. It doesn't harm clear parts at all. So super useful for attaching canopies and landing lights and all that sort of thing. Really, really good. If you can pick up some, get some. It's not an essential. I built models for 35 years without using this stuff. discovered it fairly recently, and now I can't get by without it. Absolutely superb. Now, another thing that's really useful to have is one of these. You can get these at your hobby store or online. These are really useful for holding parts while you're painting. They're like crocodile clips on top of little sticks. So you put the part in the jaws, and it'll go while you paint it with either spray paint or with a brush paint. So I think if you had all or some of this stuff, you'd be in a perfect spot to be able to start making this kit. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. I hope this has given you some insight into the type of equipment that you'd need to make a model. And I hope it's made it a little bit more accessible, because I understand that when you're starting out in anything, in any activity, there's a bit of a fire hose, and often when you ask people, they talk from the perspective of many years of experience, and they take a lot of things for granted that you know or that are self-evident and this sort of thing. So any questions, please ask in the comments. I'll respond to as many of them as I can. If you're an experienced modeler and you think I've got something wrong, let me know in the comments. I'm sure you will, but let me know in the comments. If you're an experienced modeler and you think I've missed something out, or you use something in a certain way, let us know in the comments. Maybe I can learn something too, I hope so. But thank you very much. And in the next video, we're going to be looking at paint selection, different types of paints that you can use, different types of painting techniques. So I'd love it if you could join me, and I'd love it if together we could build this kit. Why not? It'll be great fun. So happy modeling, everyone, and have a great time.